It's good to be here. I was reflecting this week on some time in high school. I did a lot of music in high school. I sang in a few choirs, just a few. I actually played the bass in orchestra just because that's where my friends were. So I learned the bass so I could not feel left out. I had a pretty strong FOMO response in high school. Learned a whole instrument just so I could hang out with my friends. But I'd never actually done anything with piano in school, which is actually sort of my main instrument now. But I had been playing piano for a while and mostly self-taught where jazz was concerned. I had taken some music theory, which meant I knew a lot about chords. I had played the bass, so I understood how sort of the foundation should work in at least, a Bach groove of sorts. And I sang, which meant I had some sense of melody. So I wanted to try out for one of our many, many jazz ensembles that we had at the school. We had 5 or 6, I think. So I thought I might get one kind of by default. There can only be so many people who play the piano. So I showed up to the audition, and there was my music theory teacher who knew that I knew a thing or two about music theory, so check. And there was the kind, disciplined teacher who could really wail on the saxophone, but he was pretty chill, and my sister was a gifted saxophonist, so I knew he knew her and thought maybe I might get in there by that, so check. And there was also a Muppet there, literally. See, one of our jazz teachers, the legend goes, was a friend of Jim Henson's and was the inspiration for the Muppet who played the saxophone, Zoot, who would end every Muppet show with the wrong note. He played a saxophone and kind of look at it. So there I was playing the piano for a Muppet of some fame. And so I walked in to play for these folks, and I wish I could remember exactly what tune I played. But what I do remember is when I was done, they said, well, why don't you just lay down a B-flat blues for us and hear how that goes? That meant that what they wanted me to do was play this song, like sort of a follow a blues progression in B flat. And I thought to myself, well, that's easy enough. I know the chords, 1-4, 1-4, 5-4-1, right, Dennis? And I knew the notes that were in all of those chords, and I knew the rhythms that it was supposed to go. So I laid it down as someone who knows those things would have. And I turned around as pleased as I could be, and they looked at me beaming and said, so I hear you also play the bass. That was the end of my piano audition there. Yes, thank you. Spirit of life, be with me. Poor Dennis can likely only just imagine just how square my sad blues riff must have sounded. The idea of it is almost embarrassing to confess in all of your presence. I lacked that musical training, but I really lacked something else that we'll be talking about. Leslie's song that she sang today, Trouble in Mind, was so beautiful. It was written by Richard M. Jones, and he was born in Louisiana in 1892. Because this month, Black History Month, is a month to remember and to think about our history, it's good to recall that in Louisiana in 1960, just 30 years before Richard was born and just before the Civil War, there were 18,647 people who were free in the entire state of Louisiana. There were 331,726 people enslaved in Louisiana. Sometimes we don't remember or know that that order of magnitude was happening in some of the states. That's more than 17 people enslaved for every free person in Louisiana in 1860. It's hard to get that kind of trouble in your mind, right? And it is troubling to say the very least. It's the kind of history that we try to think about today, but really just can't. Not fully, not in a feeling place, and barely in a knowing place. But that was part of the history of the place where Richard Jones was born, where he began his musical career. Now, an old story about Jones goes that the M is about the M in Richard M. Jones. The story is that it stood for My Knee. Musicians called him Richard My Knee Jones because of the stiff knee that plagued him his whole life and the frequency with which he'd tell everybody about my knee, my knee, my knee. And I'll tell you, it's not easy on those pedals if you're playing it the way Jones used to play. So Richard My Knee Jones. He came to the piano after some other instruments, a little like someone else I know. And he started to gain notoriety when he started making records with this sort of little-known cornetist at the time who picked up the trumpet later, who went by the name Louis Armstrong. And after some success leading bands with the likes of Armstrong and others, he became a record executive, managing musical acts and recordings. He was part of the Second Great Migration up to Chicago, where he helped to lead the record label Decca in Chicago, which is a pretty big deal for jazz, definitely in the 30s and the 40s, and really is even today. He died in Chicago in 1945 at the age of 54. His tune, Trouble in Mind, might be his best known composition, though. It's been recorded by a range of singers and musicians, and when it's recorded, artists tend to make the lyrics their own. I encourage you to listen to some of the beautiful and many recordings. In the Muddy Waters recording, he refers to Tennessee and to some of the troubles he's had more personally. He made the recording more about his own life. And instead of the rocking chair and the verse in the original lyrics we heard, Muddy Waters says he'll go down to the railroad yard and let the 219 ease his troubled mind. It's easy to let that lyric go by. It sounds nice. Trains kind of helping you feel better. Gonna watch the trains? No, that doesn't quite fit. Maybe get on a train? No, that's not what he meant. It was in Nina Simone's version, the famous version in 1975 at the Newport Jazz Festival, where she borrows some of Muddy Waters' lyrics for her own version of the tune that's a little more explicit, as the great Miss Simone often was. Her closing stanza goes like this: I'm gonna lay my head on a lonesome railroad line and let the 219 train ease my troubled mind. It's a hard lyric to hear, but it's only a more graphic depiction of the original lyric that Leslie sang to us. Going down to the river, gonna take my old rocking chair, my easy chair, and if the blues don't leave me, if they don't leave me, I'll rock away from there. It means going down the river. And this is the blues. This is just a taste of the blues that Dr. Michel talked about in The Beautiful Story for All of Us. It's not an arrangement of notes on a keyboard with some dominant seventh chords, trust me. When life is more than we can bear, when the silence that comes with death sounds preferable to what is rattling around in our heads, what is piercing our hearts, what is troubling our souls, that is the blues. And make no mistake about it, my friends, there would be no such thing as religion. There'd be no such thing as church. There'd be no such thing as faith. There'd be no need for it if none of us never felt that way. And music has been helping to tell the story of faith, of longing, of need for a long, long time. The Psalms themselves were songs never meant to be spoken in words. Not long ago, or not long after Richard My Knee Jones was born, roughly 2 generations after the end of the Civil War, W.E.B. Du Bois published The Souls of Black Folk. It was launched like a thunderbolt into the collective conscience of a nation limping, trying, moving toward a new identity. Lurching, maybe, is better. It was published first as essays in the Unitarian and the Transcendentalist strongholds of the Atlantic and the Dial, and W.E.B. Du Bois set the stark analysis of American life for Black persons against refrains of what he called the sorrow songs. Each essay, and then each chapter, when it was collected as a book, begins with stanzas, including actual printed notes of music for some of these songs sung by persons of color in his time, and remembering the pain, living out the wrongs, and singing about the sorrow. These songs, these forms of deep pain and suffering make the skeleton of a work that still awaits answers to many of the questions it asks in its pages. Chief among those questions opens the work. These are Du Bois's words. Between me and the other world, there is ever an unasked question. Unasked by some through feelings of delicacy, by others through the difficulty of rightly framing it. All, nevertheless, flutter around it. They approach me in a half-hesitant sort of way, eye me cautiously or compassionately, and then, instead of saying directly, "How does it feel to be a problem?" they say, "I know an excellent colored man in my town," or "I fought at Mechanicsville," or "Do not these Southern outrages make your blood boil?" At these I smile, or am interested, or reduce the boiling to a simmer, as the occasion may require. To the real question, how does it feel to be a problem? I answer seldom a word. How does it feel to be a problem? Well, I don't have to sing it for you. Miss Simone, Muddy Waters, Richard Jones, Langston Hughes, W.B. Du Bois, and a range of others can tell you. The songs of sorrow, the ways that blues erupts and seeps from the aching souls of those in the singular path of that question, they can all tell you. I know here gathered among us, even in this place, I know even myself at times, and some of you know it too. How does it feel when I am the problem? To know it is our mind and our heart, to know it in our mind and heart, our psyche, or if you will, our soul. To really feel that. What is that like to know that that is the trouble we have? W.E.B. Du Bois asked that question in 1903. And conversations taking place still today tell us that so many people, including, and most at times importantly, Black people here in this country, are still having to answer it over and over and over. And you might be asking, how do we solve the problem? How do we fix the problem? But here's the thing, friends. No person is a problem. Some people have problems, I assure you, but no person is a problem. So what do you say to someone you love? What do you say to someone whose very happiness is something you have a stake in your life? What do you say to your kin and to your kindred? What do you say to someone you hold close to your heart when they look at you and ask if they are a problem? What will you do if I feel like a problem? What are you going to do when someone makes someone you love feel like a problem? Well, that's easy. You give someone else a problem, and fast. See, say you're a legislator who's letting unjust, unconstitutional detentions continue because it helps a few people get richer at the expense of the poor. You're going to have a problem. Say you're a police commission who thinks it's acceptable that the Hawaiian people are hugely overrepresented in Hawaii's prisons. You are going to have a problem. Say you're someone who makes a congregant at this church afraid one of my children feel less than because of who they are, who they love, how they look, or anything else. Yeah, now you're really going to have a problem. Friends, some people say if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. I say, if you want a real solution, give someone a problem. Show up to legislative hearings in these coming weeks and follow what your legislator does. If you don't like it, give them a problem, like a primary challenge. I know some people in our congregation who'd make quite exceptional legislators if they thought they'd like to. You can show up to police commissions like so many of our congregants have been doing. If you want to see a change, give them a problem, like the change we're seeing now where someone of Hawaiian ancestry will be welcomed on to the police commission, perhaps for the first time in a long time. Show up for your friends in ways that help them, in ways that assure them that they are not a problem to be solved. Songs of sorrow sing to all of us, friends. The complexity, the depth, the history, and holiness of them is more than I can personally ever fully grasp. And to try to do so in 20 minutes would be unconscionable. And indeed, to answer the questions they ask is really sort of missing the point. Almost all trouble comes when we are ill-fitting into a system. Dr. King used the word maladjusted. Ill-equipped for a task, ill-feeling in our skin, and sometimes it's only by good trouble that John Lewis encourages or prescribes to each one of us that we will change a sick world to hold those accountable who are making it ill. And our faith calls us to do no less. Our faith is kindled by those who make a person a problem, our faith is kindled not by those who make a person a problem, but by those who make problems for those who would make a person feel that way. Our faith grows not by ignoring the pains we cannot understand, but by understanding that another person's pain is truly ours to share. And our faith is bound to a future made not by those who try to turn a frown upside down, but by those who will turn the very world around on its axis to make it so. This and only this will turn the songs of sorrow into songs of rejoicing. This and only this will turn the vacant chords into songs of loving. This and only this will turn a realm of trouble into a world of understanding. And never, never forget in this work, my friends, the words and the wisdom of Margaret Mead, who reminds us never to doubt the power of a small group of dedicated individuals to change the world, for indeed, it's all that ever has. May it ever be so. Blessed be, and amen.